Okay, so today we're going to continue talking about the unit circle. All right, so just let's recall from yesterday what we're supposed to know. That the unit circle is a circle on your axis that has a radius of 1. So that's up, down, left, right, and that's 1. So you go to the right one, which puts us at 1, 0. Up 1, that would be at 0, 1. To the left one, negative 1, 0, and down 1, which would put us at 0, negative 1. So when you draw your unit circle, okay, it looks kind of like that. Hopefully yours looks a little bit better than mine. And then remember we talked about this point that was on the unit circle, and we talked about another way to represent this point, point P. And remember that if I have this angle that's drawn in, and notice over here I wrote it as sine x, cosine x, tan x. That means I'm calling the angle x, okay, instead of theta this time. It's no big deal. All right, so remember your sine is actually which value? Your sine is your y value. Your cosine is your x value. And tangent, remember, is sine over, in this case, x. Sine over cosine. So it would be sine x over cosine x. All right, and your point xy would be written as x, which is cosine, so it's cosine x, and sine x. All right, so we are now going to fill in this chart with the unit circle. So I'm going to use this picture here to help me out. All right, so I'm just going to move everything a little bit. Oops, sorry. All right, so let's talk about sine. Remember, sine is your y value, cosine is your x value, and tangent is sine over cosine here. So at 0 degrees, okay, which is right here at 0 degrees, your angle is 0. Okay, so your angle at 0 degrees here, okay, which means it's not open. It's right on the x-axis, the positive side of the x-axis. Remember, your sine is your y value, so your sine, theta, is equal to 0. Cosine, which is your x value, is equal to 1. Tangent, which is equal to sine over cosine, that would be 0 over 1, which is equal to 0. 0 in the numerator of a fraction is equal to 0. Okay, so now we're moving around the unit circle. We're going to go to 90 degrees. Sine at 90 degrees, remember that your y value, is equal to 1. Cosine at 90 degrees is equal to 0. That's your x value. And tangent at 90 degrees, well, that's sine over cosine. So that's 1 over 0. 0 in the denominator is undefined. So you guys could probably squeeze it in there better than me. Defined. Undefined. Okay, going around to 180 degrees. We're over here. Remember, sine is the y value. That is 0. Cosine of 180 degrees is equal to negative 1. That's your x value. And tangent is 0 over negative 1, which is equal to 0. Okay, moving right along down to 270 degrees. Sine of 270 degrees, that's your y value, is negative 1. Cosine of 270 degrees is your x value. That's equal to 0. Tangent of 270 degrees is sine over cosine, so that's negative 1 over 0, which is equal to undefined. Okay, 360 degrees, that's right back around to the beginning, which is the same thing. So 360 degrees is the same thing as 0 degrees. Okay, so sine of 360 degrees, which is your x or your y value, is equal to 0. So, cosine of 360 degrees is your x value, which is equal to 1. And tangent of 360 degrees is 0 over 1. That's sine over cosine, which is equal to 0. So you need to know, you should be able to tell me if I ask you what is, let's say, cosine of 180 degrees. You need to visualize in your head the unit circle. You should be able to tell me that cosine, which is your x value, is going to the left, at 180 degrees, and x is cosine is x, and that is equal to -1. Of course, if you forget, you can. If I ask you a cosine of 180 degrees and you don't know off the top of your head, then you're gonna have to plug it into your calculator. Okay, but you're gonna have to know the unit circle because we will use that. All right, so let's flip it over. Okay, so let's talk about the signs in the quadrants for sine, cosine, and tangent. So remember, this is quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and this would be quadrant 4. Just moving it down a little bit. All right, so in quadrant 1, your point in quadrant 1 is a positive x and a positive y. In quadrant 2, your x is negative, your y is positive. In quadrant 3, your x is negative, your y is negative. And in quadrant 4, your x is positive and your y is negative. Okay, so now let's talk about sine, cosine, and tangent. In quadrant 1, sine is going to be what? Positive and negative. Well, sine is your y value. Your y value in quadrant 1 is positive. Cosine is your x value. Cosine in quadrant 1, your x value is positive. And tangent, which is sine divided by cosine, so that's a positive divided by a positive, cosine, sine over cosine, which is equal to a positive. All right, in quadrant 2, sine is your y value, that is positive. Cosine is your x value, that's negative. And tangent is a positive divided by a negative, and a positive divided by a negative is a negative. So tangent is negative in quadrant 2. In quadrant 3, sine is negative, cosine is negative, because that's your x value, y value, x value, and tangent, right, is your sine divided by cosine, and a negative divided by a negative is a positive. All right, in quadrant 4, sine is your y value, that's negative. Cosine is your x value, that's positive. And tangent is a negative divided by a positive, sine over cosine. A negative divided by a positive is a negative. All right, so you have to know the signs in these quadrants. So I'm going to give you a way to remember this. So now notice, in quadrant 1, everything is positive in quadrant 1, sine, cosine, and tangent. In quadrant 2, the only thing that's positive in quadrant 2, only the sine is positive. The other two are negative. In quadrant 3, only tangent is positive. And in quadrant 4, only cosine is positive. So let's write down here on the bottom. All of them are positive in quadrant 1. Only sine is positive in quadrant 2. Only tan is positive in quadrant 3. And only cosine is positive in quadrant 4. So we're going to remember this like this. A for all would be all. S will be students. Right? S for students. All students. A for all. Take. T for take. T for tangent. Calc. Oops. All students take calc. So the C in calc is C for cosine. Okay, so we have all students take calc. All right, so now let's take a look at the bottom here. Just going to move this up. Okay, so let's look at these problems down here. It says determine which quadrant beta terminates in. So here I have sine is greater than 0 means, so right above it, if sine is greater than 0, that means it's positive. Cosine is less than 0, that means it's negative. All right, so you're going to draw a little axes like that and put in there all students take calc. All right, so you put little check marks. Sine is positive in quadrant 1 for all and quadrant 2 for sine. Cosine is negative in quadrant, remember it's only positive in 1 and 4, so that means it's negative in quadrant 2 and negative in quadrant 3. So therefore, sine is positive, cosine is negative, is in quadrant 2. So the answer is quadrant 2. All right, so let's do B. So draw a little axes, put all students take calc. Tan is less than 0 means tan is negative. Cosine is greater than 0 means cosine is positive. Tangent is negative in quadrants 2 and 4 because it's positive in 1 and 3. So it's negative in the other 2 quadrants. Cosine is positive in quadrants 1 and 4. So where is my tangent negative, my cosine positive? That would be in quadrant 4. Okay, so let's try the other ones. All right, C. So draw your little axes here, right? All students take calc. All right, cosine is greater than 0 means cosine is positive. Tan is greater than 0 means tan is positive. Cosine is positive in quadrants 1 and 4. So put little checks there. Tangent is positive in quadrants 1 and 3. So where is cosine positive and tan positive? In quadrant 1. All right, so let's take a look at the last one, D. Have it a little bit cut off. So D. So write down all students take calc. This is for D. I have sine is less than 0 means sine is negative. Cosine is less than 0 means cosine is negative. So in which quadrants is sine negative? Sine is negative in 3 and 4. So put little checks there, 3 and 4. Cosine is negative. Cosine is negative in quadrants 2 and 3. So put little checks. So where is sine? I want to know where sine is negative and cosine is negative. That would be in quadrant 3. So the answer for D is quadrant 3. Okay, so that's it, and we'll do some more in class tomorrow. Have a good night.